Good evening, and thank everyone for coming. Tonight is a special town council meeting, a joint meeting with the planning board. We thank them for coming tonight. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask the town clerk to do a roll call for the planning board as well as the council.
All right, Council Tassinari? Council Costigan?
Yep.
Council Munson?
Here.
Council DeMarco?
Here.
Council Aiello?
Here.
Council Swope? Here. Council DeRoss? Vice President Belcher?
Here.
President Lettieri?
Here.
Chris Boyce?
Here.
Anna Merceret? Here. Jason Palutro?
Here.
Gina Demento? Alyssa Campbell?
Here.
Sarah Jane Fornes?
Here.
Thank you.
Ask everyone to please rise for the pledge, led by Vice President Belcher.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just a brief overview of how tonight's meeting is going to go. Again, I thank the planning board for coming out, and I thank them for everything they've done over the past, thank the planning board for everything they've done over the past several months, over a year actually, on 3A. And I know it's not an easy task, and we very much appreciate their effort. So a brief overview as to how this evening's going to continue. I'm going to ask Chris Boyce, the chairman of the planning board, to talk a little bit on the process, how we got to where we are, talk a little bit more about density. There'll be a presentation after that from our town manager, Tony Marino, reviewing RKG's final proposal. We'll have Jim Cipolletta, our town attorney, here to answer some legal issues. We'll have questions from the councilors on the presentation. We will then open it up. There'll be one public comment period this evening. The public comment, which we will take, will only be regarding 3A. We will not be taking any other public comment. RKG still needs to draft a few zoning items for the planning board's review, and the town will then ask the state for a cursory review, not a formal 90-day review, on the draft that will be coming to the council. With that information in hand, the planning board will then vote and formally hand the council their recommendation. I anticipate that will be the end of September, early October. First meeting in October, potentially last meeting in September. The council will then ultimately vote on the recommendation made by the planning board. Chris, I will open it up for you. And again, thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. Thanks, President Lettieri. So I think in a moment, town manager will walk through our compliance path. We feel this is the lowest impact on the town. Our goal has been as close to zero impact from 3A as we could get. I think you'll see the efforts we made with RKG on this study. Councilors in the past, I believe, have asked about how we can take credit for the density that we already have in town, being one of the densest towns in Massachusetts. The town has made efforts over the past 3 decades to continue housing creation, and we feel like we have some pathways here to take advantage of that or have credit be given to Winthrop for the efforts that we've made. I think it's probably worth saying a couple things in terms of process now and as we look forward. One, I know there's obviously disagreement probably in the room and in the town for how we comply or don't comply, for how we move forward with what's been an edict from the state. I think it hopefully goes without saying, but it's probably worth saying that you might disagree with your neighbors, you might disagree with the plan that we present tonight, you might disagree with the council on their comments or votes, but I think that it's pretty obvious, and I think it's exciting that everybody who's been vocal about this really cares a lot about the fabric of Winthrop. I think everybody up here cares a lot about the fabric of Winthrop, preserving what this town is, and having control over our planning and our built environment. So that doesn't go without acknowledgement, but I think that sometimes in the disagreements it can get lost, and I want everybody to know like we care just as deeply as everybody else. So we can talk through the specifics of the plan that Tony will walk through in a minute here, but I think, as I said from the beginning, the planning board's role is to present a plan for compliance. right? We don't see the benefit of talking conceptually about 3A, conceptually about how this could impact our town. I think a specific plan can lead to specific conversations about the areas we're showing. Hopefully that can begin tonight in some more meaningful way. A future recommendation from this board, or even a vote from town council, it's probably worth noting, does not prevent the town from continuing to explore full exemptions for the density we already have. It doesn't prevent us from continuing to monitor the case in Milton and learning, like every town will, from how that case proceeds. It doesn't prevent the town from ultimately voting if needed, but I think it's important that we know what we're discussing. We know the sites that we feel as a planning board make sense. And these things are just not mutually exclusive, right? So for the town council to make the best decisions as you guys vote, we feel that we just want to make sure you have the best information and a specific plan in front of you. And our plan really here that you'll see tonight, and Tony walks us through again, is to have the lowest impact and take the most credit for the density that we already have in town. All right, so I'll turn it over to Tony, and then we can start talking specifics.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Tony Marino. I'm your town manager. This PowerPoint slide should be familiar to the people who were at the last meeting. It's hasn't changed too much with regard to maybe just a little more detail with regard to some of the districts and whatnot. So, Larissa, if we go to the next slide. Oh, one after that, sorry. So we started with the preliminary modeling that RKG put together. Based on discussions with the planning board, they dialed into really two main areas, Seal Harbor area to include Fort Heath, and then Governor's Park. And then what we were going to do with the CBD is not do an overlay district there, but create what's called a MMU offset to be able to get credit for, as you can see here in the chart, 221 units, and I'll get into how they derived at that number in a minute. This plan with the 228 and, using the underlying zoning and using 3A without any modifications would bring us in at 828 units. So a little bit of work had to be done to get to the 881 after taking the credit. So again, as you can see here, we were 54 units short. So we got into, what the ultimate recommendation were going to be. But next slide, please, Larissa. This is how we got for the mandatory mixed-use district option. This is something that's allowed in the current guidelines. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities allow communities to submit this kind of a district. Keep in mind that this is just to take credit for the units that are going to be built in the CBD. This does not include an overlay. No other original zoning in the CBD other than one minor change will be changed, and it's only for the one minor change to accept the unit. So I'll get into that in a second. But what they do is they modeled the whole CBD if they wanted to use 3A. And as you can see there, that came out at 343 units. Well, what it says, you can either take the lesser of the two. It's 25% of the town's units requirement or the MMU model for the CBD. Obviously, the 221 was less, so that was the credit that we get. So you take the 882 minus the 221, and then we're required in other 3A districts to create 661 units. Next slide, please. Next one after that, sorry. So this is the recommended compliance scenario. We've got Seal Harbor, which gross acreage consists of 12.3. Their net acreage, backing out any sort of non-buildable land in that district, comes out at 10.2 acres. Unit capacity is 333 units with an MBTA 3A overlay district. And then the density units per acre, which is the 32.6 number down below. When you get to Governor's Park, it's 15.3 acres. Net acreage there is 15. Unit capacity is 341 with the overlay district, and then density per unit there is 22.8. So our grand total there is 27.6 acres of gross acreage, 25.2 of net acreage, less any sort of non-buildable land. Unit capacity is 674 units between the two districts that are being proposed, and that puts us at 26.7 on density unit, dwelling units rather, per acre. And this puts us, with the combined offset of the 221, this puts us at 895 units, which is 13 units over the requirement, which puts us in compliance. So the preliminary modeling for Seal Harbor, the outline here is minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet. Stories is 6 stories right now. Maximum lot coverage is 20%. Minimum open space requirement is 30%. The setbacks there are 50 from the front, 50 from the side, and 50 from the rear. Minimum parking requirements are 2 spaces per unit. And this is what dropped a little bit here, and it's just for the overlay district. I want to be clear. This doesn't change the underlying zoning or the zoning that exists today. This 1,600 square feet is a drop of 400 square feet from the current requirements of 2,000. That's what allowed us to get to the few extra units that we needed. So lot area per dwelling unit is 600 square feet, and this was explained last meeting. Again, I already discussed the acreage. So the existing units today, as Seal Harbor currently sits, is 394 units. The proposed MBTA overlay zoning is only 333 units. So the existing density gets us more units than what MBTA and 3A would allow by 61 units. And then the density, per acre there is 32.6. Next slide, please. Preliminary zoning for Governor's Park. Again, same as before, minimum lot size is 20,000. Stories here is 3 stories. Maximum lot coverage is 30%. Minimum open space requirements 30%. Setbacks are a little less there, 25 from the front, 25 from the side, and 40 feet from the rear. Again, 2 parking spaces per unit's required. And again, here on the lot area per dwelling unit, it's dropped down to 1,900 square feet from currently sits at 2,500. And again, just for the overlay district, does not change the underlying zoning, the existing zoning that sits there today. Gross acreage we talked about, and here, similar to the other one, existing units that sit in Governor's Park today, 393 units. The MBTA modeled capacity here is 341 units, which again is 52 units below. The MBTA zoning would allow 52 units less than what sits there today. And that's 22.8, density per acre. Next slide, please. So here's the Winthrop compliance requirements. We had to have minimum land acre of 12 acres. We checked that box with yes, with the 15 acres that we have at Governor's Park. Minimum contiguous district size 6 acres, we have that. Minimum contiguous percentage of net acreage, so that's the combined district sizes, so I believe it comes out around 25, so half of that would be around 12 and a half. So that 50%, we checked that box. Minimum non-contiguous district size 5 acres, yes. Unit capacity 882, we checked that box, and the 15 dwelling units per acre, we checked that box. So this plan complies with the guidelines and the state requirements as outlined. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a summary of what I already talked about. We've got the 674 units, and that's the gets us to the 895 total, which is over the 881 or 2 that's required. And then last slide, if you don't mind. So this is the changes to the existing zoning. One of the requirements in the CBD, and it's talked about at the last meeting, is the special permit requirement for just one section of the parking. So 17.5.2.10 parking requirements for the Center Business District. All the parking requirements stay the same, but right now it's currently listed that it has to be by special permit from the planning board. That language will change to say with site plan review from the planning board. So none of the requirements change, but it won't be tied to the special permit. As we know, we can't have any sort of special permit requirements with the thing. So in order for us to get the offset, that's the one minor change, and this was discussed at the last meeting. And then the deviations I talked about, the lot area per dwelling unit in Governor's Park, just for the overlay district, again, not the underlying zoning like above, just for that is 2,500 to 1,900 square feet. And the lot area per dwelling unit in Seal Harbor goes from 2,000 to 1,600 square feet. As far as, and Chris and Jim both hit on it a little bit, next steps, RKG has said they should have the zoning language that are required to make these changes and, for the planning board to have something to submit to the town council. They should have that done by the end of the week, August 30th. That was their anticipated. They're working on it all this week. And then obviously the planning board will do the cursory review, which was offered up by the state. Then they will, if that comes back with no changes, then they would submit that over to the council with their, recommendation. I want to be clear, the state's worked with us, through Zoom meetings and consultation with RKG, every sort of change and step and, consideration. This Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, Chris Kluckman and her team have worked with us. They understand we want to acknowledge the existing zoning. Unfortunately, they're bound by the laws and the criteria and the general guidelines that are passed by the state. They have to follow those. They don't have the ability to, deviate or change those or give variances. So they're trying to work with us to work within those guidelines to come up with this plan that has minimal impact for Winthrop. This is existing zoning. Obviously, what's there is greater than what we're proposing. And, when we feel, our target and our goal from the council was to bring forward a plan with minimal impact, allow us to comply, and we feel like that's what we did, with no minimal or no new units being created. And as Chris hit, one of the things that came out of it was, one of the good things, I think, is, pointing out the density, talking about how dense Winthrop is. And what I didn't know, because I came from communities with large land masses, and really, when it came to 40B, and this is sort of a little off topic, but 40B requirements was always 10% of your units has to be affordable, 10%. What I didn't realize was what was pointed out in that letter was that, there's a density requirement here. You can get an exemption from density. Now, it's either Malden or Medford, one of the two actually went for it and got it. I did do some digging into it. It's nothing RKG can help us with, but I am looking into, we have to get, that letter that was sent, by 2 residents, it was fine, but the actual, certification of the multifamily housing units and how many we had in town and if we hit the percentage was never certified. So I'm trying to get that certified to see if we can actually become exempt from 40B that way. That would sort of make the case for any sort of changes we want to make to the law as, at this point we need to change the 3A law, right? So we need to go and say we want a density exemption. Well, you need to put in a density exemption either into the guidelines or the law. Having that and, getting us exempt from 40B would make the case. And like Chris said, that fight's not over. So we're going to keep working on that and keep pushing that forward. There's been other concerns that have been raised, and I'll pass it off to Mr. Attorney, our town attorney, Jim Cipolletta, at this point, with regard to some concerns over condo docs and things like that. And he'll get into a little more detail with that. So thank you, everybody, and I'll give it over to Jim.
Good evening. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address some of my friends who I've been having sort of on the street corner, a coffee shop, and offline kind of conversations about 3A and so forth. But in a more formal setting, I just want to make it clear that nothing I say should be interpreted either as an endorsement, an acceptance, or a repudiation of the MBTA 3A statute. We may end up in litigation, hoping not. If this, as Tony and Chris and the planning board and have been working along with the council, it looks like there's a way forward to accomplish something that's going to be satisfactory to the state and also will benefit the community. Also, I am very well aware, as is Tony, because we talk about it every day, of some of the sensitive issues that surround the 3A MBTA zoning, such as the constitutionality, state overreach, the encroachment of the town's right to self-government under the Home Rule Amendment to the Constitution. We're aware of those, and I've been looking at those since the day that I hit that chair up there in the town council's office. So if those ever become live issues, we're ready to take those on. But hopefully, we're not looking for litigation, but the best way to avoid a fight is to be prepared for the fight. And I think the plan that the planning board, the council, and Tony are trying to cobble together here, and hopefully with a view towards satisfying the state, is going to come to fruition. So I just want to hit a couple of just the wave tops of some of these other issues. As most of you know, and I'm sure all of you probably know, this is not a debate on whether or not the town of Winthrop accepts the statute 3A. The statute's on the books. It's there. It's mandatory to be complied with. Certain things have to be done by the town. What then becomes the debate going forward is whether the plan that is submitted, if one is acceptable to the town of Winthrop, and whether that should be adhered to with regard to the establishment of an overlay district. That would be the next important step, is to look at that, or now to look at this plan when the consultants come back with it and the planning board has a chance to look at it and make a recommendation, whether or not that's something that's acceptable, and that will go to a vote. One way or another, it will go to a vote. Tony mentioned a very important word, and that is compliance. And I've been having conversations with the Attorney General's office and others in the state because we always need to keep the lines of communication open. Not only so that they know what we're doing, and believe me, they know what we're doing, but we like to know what they're doing as well, so that we can avoid some friction going down the road further, however it goes, so that we can be prepared, and if we can come to some agreement that is beneficial to the town and everybody is on board with it, then we will have a receptive ear. At least they know that we're not shutting them down. We're willing to talk to them, as Tony has been doing several times a week. So the statute requires that the town create and maintain this overlay zoning component. The guidelines that are created under 3A do not require that any construction of units actually take place. It's only mandatory that the overlay district be established. This is going to become important in a few minutes because in the communication we've been having with the Attorney General's office, I've been able to develop some emails. And yes, I'm going to read them, and if anybody wants a copy of them, you don't have to file a public records request. Email me, I'll send them to you. It's fine. So I just want everybody to be on the same page so that we all understand what stead we may be in with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But the law also implements a punitive portion of the statute. So if we don't comply with the statute and we don't establish an overlay district, then certain things are going to be forfeited by the town in the way of giving up grant money for certain projects and services that might be essential to the town and to individual homeowners and residents of the town. That's something that needs to be weighed. And that's something that I think the town has a pretty good grasp on right now. So if the town does not adopt a plan, or a plan is presented and it's knocked down and another one is not slid into its place as a substitute plan, and we go the way of some other communities, then the Attorney General is going to bring suit. Not only are we going to lose the funding, these grants that are very important because they refer to things such as seawalls and flood control and other things that are very important to a community that's geographically like ours, but we're also going to be doing battle in the Superior Court and maybe beyond with the Attorney General's office, and they're going to file an action against us to coerce us into complying. Are we afraid of that? No, we're not. And we're ready. If that happens, and again, nobody wants to get tied up in court. Litigation is not a solution to everything. It's a solution to some things. Some of the things that I've been talking about with friends about concern condominiums and what the effect might be on if a condominium association or a trust is subsumed into the overlay district. Will that statute override or preempt the condominium docs? My research tells me no. Now, nobody has interpreted that on the state level. I am not the arbiter of that. But in my conversations with the people at the Attorney General's office, Margaret Hurley most specifically and most recently, who happens to be the chief of the Housing and Municipal Law Unit in the AG's office, tells me, and I'll read that email too, that condominium associations and condos that are presently existing do not have to worry. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to be affected in any way by that. Only newly established condominiums who choose to establish in the 3A overlay district would be affected. Now, that comes from two different sources. First, it comes from EOH LC, which created the guidelines under the 3A statute, And they say in an email to us, as to existing condo docks and restrictions, those would not now be invalid or violative of the guidelines. They are still presumably in conformance with existing underlying zoning districts under which they were approved, or are pre-existing non-conforming uses. So anything that existed, any condos that existed, any documents and documentation that is active and is in effect, as of the first public hearing on the 3A, and that would be tonight, from my estimation, anything that exists now is protected under 40A Section 6. That's another section that Assistant Attorney General Hurley had pointed to me, and I agree with it. And I've read that, been doing zoning for 40 years, and I'm pretty well convinced that that is a protection that would be afforded to the condominium associations. Most recently, and we've been going back fast and furiously because we knew that this public hearing was coming upon us, and we had to put a little bit of pressure on the AG's office to give us some answers. And as usual, you know, they are dealing with a number of cities and towns, and maybe we're not the most important, but we have been the loudest, so we have been able to get some things in writing. And Margaret Hurley, Chief of Housing and Municipal Law Division in the Attorney General's office, writes to me on 21 August 2024, I agree with your assessment that zoning will have no impact on any requirements in the condo documents. I said, well, can you give me something really official, really official, so that I can go back and talk to the council and talk to the planning board and all the good people who are coming out to a public hearing on Tuesday. So she wrote back to me yesterday, and she said, yes, 40A Section 6 and 7 provide that protection that we'd spoken about on the phone. And Section 3A only requires a community to zone for compliant districts and does not require actual construction. And there may be legal impediments to actual housing production. Well, we know one of the legal impediments to that might be the condominium documents. There have been a couple of things, too, that were brought to my attention, just talking to people and having a discussion around town hall and with friends. And I just want to point out a couple of things. So if you have an apartment or a condo and you want to alter the interior of it and you want to make your den into a bedroom, so you add a bedroom, that's not adding a unit. That's just adding a bedroom. You may or may not need a building permit depending on what you're doing, but that's not going to be affected by the 3A, and 3A is not going to affect that kind of work, whether you're in an apartment or a condominium unit. Any two-family, right now, any two-family home that wants to increase to a three-family home, which was one of the things that was sort of targeted by the 3A zoning, is to make multifamily dwellings available by right and not by special permit. Well, you can do that now. And we've been doing it for a long time by taking two families and turning them into four, turning them into threes, simply by filing with the Board of Appeals under the use variance section of our zoning ordinance. And sometimes they say yes, if they think it's appropriate and you have the parking and so on and so forth and you meet all of the requirements. Sometimes they say no because of certain neighborhood concerns, or there's not enough parking, or there are other safety issues. But there is a mechanism, and that's happening anyway. So it's not that 3A is going to allow something that can't already be done now under our current zoning scheme. It's already allowed. So that's not something that's going to bring on an onslaught of extra units or lodging houses or things of that nature. The other thing is that even if you do have the overlay to the district, the underlying zoning is still in place, except for a couple of things that are specifically called out in the statute. So your dimensional regulations are going to stay the same. The height is going to stay the same. a building now that might have 5, let's say 6 units in it, if they are in the overlay district and they want to add units, well, they still just can't do it, because once you go outside the footprint, now you're going to implicate Planning Board, Board of Appeals, Conservation. It's not an automatic. So this is not one of those, the 3A blesses it and you get it done. So there's still local control that is left in place by the underlying zoning that does not go away. So I think that's important to mention. Again, we don't have the final word on this. That's the best interpretation I can get from the people who argue interpretations before the courts on behalf of the Attorney General's office. We seem to be on the same page, although they may not ultimately be the final arbiter. It may be a judge. But we don't know because it hasn't been tested and we don't have an interpretation of how that's going to affect us. But that's our best legal evaluation and analysis as of this time. And with regard to the paper compliance, it seems like everybody is on the same page with regard to that. We all came down in the same position. The state's on board with it. I think all of the work that has been done by Tony and his staff and the planning board and all those who have been putting together all the data and counting the unit, doing the unit counts and the square footage and so forth with the consultants, I think has come out to be what is going to be acceptable to the state. If it's not acceptable to the state, it's going to be a fight. Are we ready? Yeah. We're not running away from this. This is something, it's not a guarantee, but it is very, very promising. And I share Tony's optimism, even dealing with people who deal in adversarial situations all day up at the Attorney General's office. And nobody that I can see has put us in the crosshairs and say, hey, we're going to go after Winthrop. I think their focus is on other places. I don't think this law is necessarily written for Winthrop and say, hey, let's go get the densest populated place and make them drop 600-800 more units in it. I don't think that's their concern. And again, anybody wants a copy of what I've got from the AG's office, just email me. I'll get it out to you within the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So now I'm going to open it up to the council as well as the planning board. If anybody has any thoughts, questions.
I wanted to give one bit of color to some of what Tony walked through. There's a lot of numbers up there. I think Seal Harbor and Governor's Park, we can talk through. Clearly, I hope you can tell from Attorney Cipoletta's great presentation that those two areas were zoned by special permit. They were zoned, baseline zoning doesn't cover what was built there. They're denser than baseline zoning would allow. Modifications of those buildings would have to go through the compliance path of special permit modifications. They couldn't just flip from a special permit to a 3A. The units that we've taken credit for in the 3A modeling on both of those parcels are less than what exists on those sites now. So I think, as RKG pointed out at one point, if the buildings were lost in a storm, the applicant would have a choice of pursuing a new special permit or pursuing 3A. 3A would offer them less units than what they currently have, right? So it's an important distinction. The CBD MMU is probably where there'll be a lot of questions. So I think just to give color there, the benefit of that, as we've learned, is that is an example, I think, of us taking credit for zoned density that we have in town, right? So it is not a 3A overlay. It's just us taking credit for what exists there while still able to maintain our ground floor commercial use. I think we as a board were concerned when we started the CBD discussion that we feel that a walkable, retail-oriented pedestrian center, a node in town, is a really important vernacular for a New England seaside town, and we've kind of stuck with that. This MMU overlay allows us to keep and require ground floor commercial with residential above, does not exceed the 48-foot height requirement that exists in baseline zoning. and then the units are able to be counted and deducted from our total, right? So those are units that I think we all planned on at one day seeing or having the opportunity to see, and there's no otherwise change to the zoning that's happening in the CBD, right? So that piece might be new to the council as we kind of present this, but I just want to make sure that we kind of clarified of the 3 districts, 2, I think, are actual 3A overlays and showing less units, and 1 maintains the fabric that I think we've all expected of the CBD. So just a little color.
And I know we've brought up RKG a few times tonight. I just want everybody to realize that we had asked them to be here, but they did have a prior commitment that they couldn't be here. It's not that we didn't want them here or anything like that. Questions from the council? I'll start at the end and work our way through. If you have any, Councilor Swope.
Hi. Yeah, thank you all so much.
If you could just speak into the microphone as best you can.
Thank you all so much for your work. I know it's long and sometimes arduous. I still am, even with Mr. Cipoletti's explanation, I am still not convinced because we have nothing formally in writing. We have conversations, we have nothing in writing that says condominiums are exempt from any changes in 3A zoning. It's not just Seal Harbor, it's not just Governor's Park, it could be any place in Winthrop or any other town. And we have asked for that, actually, Councilor Aiello has asked for that. We wanted something from the AG that says zoning does not change and our condominium docs hold, and the state cannot override anything like that in a zone, in a 3A overlay. Let me give you an example. So I sell my condominium to someone. So let's say I have 2 bedrooms. The person that buys that, if it's by right, a developer can make that into a 3, as I understand that, without no, it doesn't change the outlay. They're not changing the square footage. They have enough room under 3A, maybe, to make that 3. And furthermore, they can also put more people in there. That overrides our condo docs because under 3A, it's unlimited. I'm sure there's limited occupancy by health reasons, but not under 3A. So that is a major concern. If I'm misinterpreting that, I've listened to what you all said. I still don't see it in writing. I don't have it in my hands. And I don't believe that the state, because it's in perpetuity, who has changed it 4 times, can change anything they want in zoning. So I'm still not happy with it, and I rest my case.
Thank you. Councilor Aiello.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, great thanks to the Planning Board. You're all volunteers, and you've been through many, many months of this, and really appreciate the end state we appear to be close to, as well as the development of options over time. So thank you for that. To Jim and Tony, I want to pick up on Suzanne's point. Great appreciation for the fact that you have aggressively been dealing with legal counsel at the Department of Housing as well as the Attorney General's office. I think that's critical. I don't know the full amount of the material. I know, Jim, you're trying to be as brief as possible. I think it would be helpful to just post all of the correspondence on the town website in one place that's easy to find, because we have heard 20, 30 points of concern about the overlay and how they intersect with the condominium documents. And I want people to be able to read them and see what has been answered so far and what has not been answered. That could then lead to, hopefully, a place where not just councilors, but every member of the public could send questions that they still have after reading those documents to us that would allow us to then put forth another set of questions to the AG and the Department of Housing. The last question I have, Jim, if you'd be willing to answer this, is there any fundamental difference between a response
to this town about the intersection between 3A and condo documents coming via email versus being on letterhead? Are both considered sort of fully equal to each other?
I'd rather see it on email because it carries the weight of the entire office of the Massachusetts Attorney General, although the email signature from Assistant Attorney General Hurley does have her title as Division Chief and Assistant AG. I don't know if they're afraid that I'm going to scan their letterhead or what, but they'll only give it to me in an email so far. I think I'd rather have it on letterhead, and that may require that a little bit more time. But I agree. But I'm satisfied with what she tells me because she is the division chief, and there's nobody higher than her other than AG Campbell.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, just from my own personal perspective, having it arrive to us in letterhead would be personally comforting to me, and I would imagine to a lot of other people. I'll pass the mic.
Councilor DeMarco.
Thank you, and once again, thank you to the planning board for being here tonight. Thankless job. So, one thing that is, clearly up in the air right now is when it comes to condo rules and condo codes and state law and 3A and the bedroom limit. I've heard several opinions. We don't have the answers on that. We just don't. One of the key points of 3A was affordable housing. How do we attack housing in Massachusetts, and how do we make it affordable? Paper compliance doesn't do that. It doesn't do it at all. What's the point? What's the point? If we're not going to if the whole point was to make housing affordable, what's the point with paper compliance? It makes no sense whatsoever for Winthrop. I mean, the whole thing, if it's paper compliance, if that's what we're talking about power. Who has the power? The town of Winthrop or the state of Massachusetts to determine what Winthrop does? I think the power needs to stay in the town. So that's how I feel.
Vice President Belcher.
Thank you, and again, thank you to the planning board for all your work. I just want to acknowledge how different this plan looks from the initial one we saw from Utile when this all started. So thank you for taking everyone's concerns to heart and really changing what we looked at. Remember, that plan showed 2,200 units and had overlays in all kinds of places that we don't see on this map. So the town and the planning board and Tony and everyone has really taken people's concerns seriously. I just had a question. We've talked a lot about the condo docs and how zoning interacts with those, but Fort Heath, I believe, is apartments. So is there anything that either the planning board or Attorney Cipolletta you think is important to bring up to residents of the apartments as far as protections, or is it all kind of the same thing that they would have to go through special permitting to change that at this point?
Yeah, I'd weigh in that both of them are special permit projects. So modifications to those are modifications to a special permit. 3A is an overlay district. It's a path to development, right? So you can choose 3A or you can choose special permit or you can go variance. We're overlaying a 3A on a site that already has a special permit project, right? So they'd have to go through a special permit modification to do that. I think it's important to note, and Attorney Cipolletta could probably chime in with the legal language, but by right zoning doesn't mean you just get to show up with the shovel and start building, right? It doesn't mean you take a 2-bedroom, make it a 3-bedroom tomorrow because you're by right, right? By right zoning means there's a list of uses, allowable tables of height, that if you comply, we cannot reasonably withhold your approval, right? So that's by right. You're coming in with what we hoped to build in that zone anyway. You mean, so I think there's just a little distinction. By right is not free reign to just develop anything, so there's some nuance there. All of these projects, even under 3A, that are by right housing is them saying, we want housing to be the focus of the zone. So housing is what's allowed there. And they didn't want us to focus on, well, we'll give you 1 floor of housing if you give us 5 floors of office or 5 floors of lab space, right? So that's the by right nature of that. That doesn't mean site plan review, setbacks, height are all not in place. Building permits need to be pulled. Site plan review needs to happen with the same boards. So I just wanted to point out that nuance. It's a term that I understand can be totally confusing, but it's just not totally free.
Thank you. And just one final question more about timeline. I know we have a December 31st compliance date, but given that there's outstanding court cases regarding this, have we thought at all about asking for an extension or an injunction rather for the time that it takes the courts to make a decision on Milton and Rockport?
I'll defer to town manager.
Don't think we, sorry. We haven't broached that subject yet. Certainly if the council, comes forward and wants us to, we can certainly ask that question. We haven't asked yet. This, again, the thought process being is, we comply and then let those play out. If for some reason it gets overturned or the law changes, we can back it off and, then like many communities, there'll be a process to undo it, but we haven't asked for an extension yet, but certainly if the council wants us to, we could, move forward with that.
Thank you.
Well,
Councilor Munson.
Thank you. I did want to reiterate the thank yous and the appreciation to the planning board. You guys have done a great job of finding a way to minimize the negative impact to Winthrop while complying with a mandatory law. I also want to thank Jim and Tony for great presentations. I did have a couple of questions. Jim, you mentioned, these are technical questions, and then I can speak more on a higher, bigger level, but you mentioned 2 sources for the condo docs not being overridden by 3A. One was Assistant Attorney General Margaret Hurley. Who and what was the other?
The Executive Office of Housing.
Executive Office of Housing, okay.
I was their counsel.
Great. And I was wondering if you could speak to the idea of guidelines morphing. And being that you've been in this now for 40 years of doing zoning law, not to put a number on it, but I think that you, of all people, might be the best to speak about the changes of guidelines and how they can change, to what extent they can change. From right now, we've seen 4 revisions to the guidelines, and what is basically a rough kind of law now with these guidelines kind of being more articulate, more delineated. What are the chances, or can you rather not talk about prophesizing what chances are, but in terms of past and precedent, can you give examples of guidelines that have been added and changed to the point, and to what extent those rules have changed? I just would like to kind of, instead of getting letterhead for Winthrop, wouldn't it be nice if we actually could see an official guideline from the state in writing saying not just Winthrop, but every town that's complying with 3A will never have to worry about these condo docs being overwritten, or that they actually are morphing the law from just controlling the number of units you have to the number of affordable housing. So could you speak to precedent in terms of guidelines, and if there is a possibility that we still have a chance of getting the state to add a guideline to this effect?
So this is, these are guidelines that have been promulgated under the statute, and housing has been tasked with putting together those guidelines, and I've seen them be amended along the way. That is not unusual in the realm of like a new statute or breaking into a new area and trying to legislate how it's going to go. It makes lawyers very uncomfortable because we like consistency in most cases, and predictability. So I'm hopeful that they're not going to have these rolling guidelines that once a number of communities present their plans and have them approved, or if we get the stamp from the state, that all of a sudden, well, yes, this is great, you comply, but the guidelines change because here are the 2026 guidelines and so on and so forth. Those are always open to challenge, and a lot of the skirmishes are fought out in the courts over those two. So we always have a way to do that, and if it affects us, chances are it affects a lot of other communities as well. So I have my fingers crossed that this is not going to be an eternal rolling wave of change. I think they're kind of where they want to be.
So, unfortunately, it's a hope,
Yeah.
and hope isn't really where I think a lot of people need to be before they can have the trust to move forward with this. And I keep on hearing it. I mean, I think a lot of us want to say yes because we don't want to have to come out of pocket. And we certainly don't want to see flooding in our own town and having neighborhoods start to disappear because we don't have the millions of dollars that the state is going to help us with. So we want to say, I know I want to say yes, but I think there's just so much distrust still. And I think it would require something in the lines of an additional guideline for a lot of these people to vote. And I'm not saying they're voting, which I'd be fine with if there were a referendum. But if it is our jobs, and as we are doing our jobs, you presenting a proposal, us voting upon it, and you giving us the advice, then as of right now, it's still a trust game and a judgment call, and it's not really there yet. One question I wanted to also ask about was strategy, from Tony perhaps. We talked about, you said the fight continues, the fight for exemption continues, the fight, for the, and I think, Jim, you spoke to the constitutionality, the state overreach, all these possible means of overturning 3A. Right now, the strategy as we're playing it is we'll comply, and then if it's proven to be unconstitutional, then we can undo. What about the reverse strategy and the pros and cons of that by saying no first and then yes if we have to?
There's also, there's two cases out there now, the Rockport and the Milton case. Those will get decided, right? And however that plays out, that will impact 3A. But, you need to, the guidelines are great, but you need to either change the guidelines or change the law. So we do that through our local legislatures. We won't be able to do that by December 31st. So do we want to be out on a limb, not being able to apply for grants and, waiting and having this fight to maybe be ordered to do down the road anyway if it doesn't play out the way we want? But, so I would say, paper compliance, there'll be no impact on this plan for the next, year, 2 years, 3 years, probably even longer. But you do that now and then keep the fight going, right? Try to, make the density argument. Try to, get a density exemption like they have for 40B. That would be great. But it's got to happen through the law and the guidelines. So we have to make the case to make those changes. Hopefully, love to see the law go away. Do I think that'll happen? Maybe, maybe not. But the law can be changed, right? There's a process to change the law. But we have to do it through our legislatures, get a bill forwarded, and ultimately see if we can get approval and, for that. I think, that's going to be what it's going to take. And I think that's been the issue with this bylaw since the beginning. Let's be honest, it's one size fits all. Doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. Communities like Winthrop have, we should be the role model for this. Like, we've done the zoning, we've done the density requirements, we've created units, we continue to create units. Without 3A, this is going to be another, 100 or so units created in the next 5-10 years. It's going to happen on its own. So we're doing the work, and that's why I think the state's working with us to try to get us that, paper compliance or minimal impact, acknowledging that, within the laws that are there today. We have to change the law. You have to go after the law, and that's what that's where the fight continues. And in the meantime, we don't want to, look at the bigger picture. We don't want to hurt, not being able to get MVP grants. Yes, certainly we can go out and get money on our own and try to fund it on our own, but we've got other issues we need to deal with. We've got water main issues. We've got, underfunding of school, budgets. We got an override coming for that. So there are other things we need to deal with. We need all the help we can get, and to, not have the ability to go for that, I think, would be a shame. So.
Thank you. So basically, in summary, by playing the compliance first and maybe overturning later, basically buys us three years of not having to be able to get those millions of dollars that we actually have already applied for this past year that may have been overlooked or passed because of this non-compliance so far. So in other words, 3 years of several million dollars adds up to quite a lot, and we're, as opposed to saying no and losing all that coming out of pocket and when we already have looming costs.
Right. So. And I want to be clear, we have no, proof that, Representative Turco reached out for us and, talked to the EEA office, the one that made the decision. They said they had some concerns and they wanted, willing to do a sit down with us to talk about what on our application, what they thought, needed some more clarification and why they didn't give us funding. Now, to be clear, Revere in Boston got their funding, but they only got, it was a 2-year ask. They only got year 1. So there is some argument to be made that they had a lot of asks and they had limited funds because they reduced theirs down to just 1 year, half of basically what they asked for. I would assume we would have gotten the same, but we didn't. But to be, the flip side of that is they're also, as we went to apply for a CCM grant, a grant, like I said before, that's not listed as one of the grants that would be impacted, there was actually language in the application that said a community's compliance with 3A would be considered when, authorizing these grants. So they are reaching out to other grants. So I want to be clear about that. Even though they have this list, it could be impactful in other areas.
So just to boil it down, a simple equals summary, you are looking at somewhere in the vicinity of 1.7 million per year, up to a lot more that we could lose for a while if we didn't.
This ask was 1.6, right? So we had 400,000 for the Pico Ave area and then 1.2 for the Morton and Banks, design of the fix down there. That was the ask for this time. It was a 2-year grant application. You can't put a dollar value on it. We're going to apply for every grant we can, right? Federal and state. Federal takes a little longer. Their budget process is different. We've got money awarded to us for the E.B. Newton building. We're still trying to, get through the process and check the box and get the funds. So it takes longer. But these are all grants we're going to keep going for. But if we say no and then, don't paper comply and don't have the access to them, then we're waiting until this, plays out before we can apply. So I would, that would, looking as a town as a whole, we're a peninsula, we're surrounded by water, we need at least to have the opportunity to apply for those grants.
I appreciate the information and I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Costigan.
Yes, thank you, Planning Board. Appreciate all the hard work, Manager Marino as well. A lot of the councilors have already mentioned a lot of the issues that I have concerns with. I've been suspect for 3A since it's come up. So I like to listen to both sides. I've listened to both sides. And with that, Winthrop is a small town, as I mentioned early on. We are congested beyond belief. Traffic issues, as I've mentioned multiple times in past meetings. As far as Councilor Swope's concerned, with regards to a letter, by the state on a letterhead, legally, when I've done business, I've always had, legal letterhead when it's an actual law that I'm told that whether I'm delinquent with anything or I'm told to do something. Legally, there's a little letterhead on it. I think we should have a letterhead addressed to the town of Winthrop defining defining the Seal Harbor area, including the other locale there, Governor's Park. The other concern I have is 10, 20, 30 years down the line. The existing units, as far as the condo docks, providing that you're not going to change anything, to Council Swope's concern. Can you add another room, providing we don't extend the footage? Absolutely. But what does that mean? Governor's Park sits there. Those are 3-story units. Is somebody capable of buying that complete lot of land there down the line? I haven't been able to get a question answered in respect to that. If a developer was to buy all of Governor's Park, would that constitute a 3A footprint for the developer to come in and also, how would you say, build in accordance to 3A and really, congest that area as well? To Mr. DeMarco, Councilor DeMarco's concern, affordability. It surprises me that the Affordable Homes Act, $5 billion the state just passed, touting that left and right on affordability and the ability for people to purchase homes and help them get into homes. Affordability was front and center all over the news. 3A, people forget. Baker vetoed affordability. Baker vetoed tenant rights. Baker did not seal eviction notices for people who had been renters before. I'm suspect there. The law changed with regards to council, and towns representing 2/3 vote needed. Now it is majority. That was also passed prior to 3A being launched. We can go on and on. We have the federal government right now suing a couple of companies for manipulating the algorithm for keeping rents high. So this is supposed to be about affordability, and, you know, Winthrop's bending backwards. The country's divided. This has tremendously divided the town of Winthrop as well. And as I say, you know, for people who may have initially said, you know, Winthrop is a NIMBY town, it drives me crazy. I've been here all my life. Land, air, and sea. We take the burden there. We have the Route 145 main commerce route to the treatment facility here. That's a wastewater treatment facility. That's 3 million people are serviced by that treatment facility, let alone all the commerce that comes in and out of there. We have the Logan International Airport. 2 major runways fly right over the town. So again, we won't talk about potential illnesses in the past as well. And of course, sea, we are inundated by flooding right now, and that's only going to get worse. So, you know, for people to say that we haven't, you know, haven't no skin in the game here, I would be looking for a total exemption as it relates to 3A. We're congested already, and my understanding is we have 600 to 900 units that are ready to go in town right now. So I mean, right there alone, we've done our part. Councilor Aiello mentioned the last meeting, somewhere around 3,500 units have been added since 1960, if I'm correct, or the past 3 decades, whatever long it is. So again, we've done our part, I believe, and we'll continue to do our part, but how much more can Winthrop take as it relates to congestion? And again, we all live here because we love this town. It is that small, unique American town that we all love. I don't want to see it turn into Revere, East Boston, or any of these monstrosities that are springing up all over the place. As far as I'm concerned, you know, if 3A goes through, I think it's, you know, it's going to be the beginning of the end for the town of Winthrop as it relates to that pretty little town we have. It's tough enough getting out of town now. There's an awful lot more to say here, and I'm going to leave it at that. But again, just do your homework. Look into the past. Look into the some of the cases that are out there right now by the federal government. And again, affordability. This, I believe, is strictly for the benefit of you know, capital, and Wall Street's highly involved with this as well. Capital investors. There's more money in real estate today than there is Wall Street. I end there. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone on the planning board have any comments, suggestions, thoughts? You like, Hannah? Yes, absolutely.
One thing. So the only, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Cipolletta, the only zoning change in the Governor's Park and the Seal Harbor areas that's being proposed in the overlay is just the density of units. There's no other zoning change proposed in those 2 overlay districts except for the density of units. So any of the other things, number of bedrooms or none of that will be affected by the proposed plan that we were shown today.
Correct.
That's correct. And then the density that both of those plans are indicated is notably less than what's actually there currently. So even if somebody came in, bought everybody's condo out, and either one of them bought the whole district out, tore it all down, they could only by right build less than what's there now. So you'll have fewer units than more units if that were to happen. I mean, it's a bizarre situation. I'm not saying that would happen, but since that came up as one of the questions. I wanted to clarify that.
That's correct.
The other item that, I have no idea what these condo agreements are, but zoning laws are more, they're concerned with sort of a bigger grain, not fine grain things that you go to the building inspector about. And so they relate use to a lot. The lot is important. And so with a condominium, if somebody were to put in a nightclub or 16 units in their 1 unit space, whatever that is, they would have to come back and ask for permission, and they would have to show that in relation to the whole entire lot that the entire condominium owns. So it's hard to imagine somebody being able to do that on their own without the agreement of the full condominium, even though, I don't know what people's condominium documents are, but the lot, it always comes back to the lot and the size of the lot and the relationship to the lot.
Thank you. Anyone else on the planning board? Yes.
Hi. Sure. My name's Alyssa Gamble. So I echo the things that Honor just said. To me, I just want to say the proposal, in my opinion, isn't as concerning as the concerns that I hear for the reasons that we've talked about in terms of the units being fewer than what currently exists. However, when I hear all of these comments, for me, I have to look at those things really carefully because I want to make sure that I'm understanding it truly the way that I think that I am. What I've done is I've tried to look at floor plans at Seal Harbor, for example, to try to understand, are there ways to split up those units that could actually, by building code, allow for more units? And that's something that I haven't been able to figure out as an architect, how that could be done. Just because you need means of egress out of every unit, you need means of egress out of every bedroom. You can't have your second means of egress be through a bedroom. So if it's in the living room, you can't close that off to get out to a balcony, for example. So these are things that I've tried to look at just to try for myself to understand this a little bit better and to have a little more reassurance that that things really couldn't change, that this truly is a way for us to just move forward from this and be able to focus on our town while the rest of the state really does figure out this housing crisis. Winthrop is not what this law is targeting because Winthrop is already super dense, as we know. And some of these other towns really do need to do their part so that Winthrop isn't the town that's carrying all this density. And so that's just my observation.
Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, a couple of thoughts, and then I'm going to go back for a brief 1 minute if somebody has a follow-up question, a 60-second question. The goalposts seem to have continuously changed since this law was passed a few years back, and I think we can all agree that there is a housing crisis. Whatever reason there is or isn't, there is a housing crisis. If many cities and towns, and we're unique in a lot of ways, I don't think we're unique in the ways that, in a way that we're the only community that is very hesitant on 3A, and I'm sure other cities and towns are trying to find similar ways to conform or not conform or whatever they do. And the housing crisis will still exist, and I'm sure the state will move the goalpost that much more at some point because their goal is to create housing. If everybody avoided what the goal is, they're going to change the rules. That's my thought. Also, I would say that grants are not guaranteed, as we just found out. I mean, there are supposedly no restrictions, and we were just denied a grant that, to me, we should have received. you can't live your life based on a bonus you might or might not get from work. That's not part of your salary, and grants should not be the be-all and end-all. There are still many, many federal grants out there that we will continue to apply for, but we have not received millions of dollars in grants on a continuous basis by any stretch, but it is definitely something. Obviously, it's a carrot that they dangle out there. I am incredibly happy to see that we're going to continue to pursue density requirements that might potentially have an impact on 40B as well as 3A, and that's always good to hear. Another thing, whenever anything is brought before this council, I mean, my first thought is, what's in it for Winthrop? What benefits are Winthrop going to get? How is it going to help move Winthrop forward financially or any other way? What impacts is it going to have? And I know Councilor Aiello's mentioned this. I know the town manager is looking into this, but to have those potential impacts, whether it be on education or public safety or whatever it happens to be, there are impacts to everything you do in life, and we have to be aware of those, and we have to know those as best we can before we make these decisions blindly. I do, again, thank the planning board. They've put a tremendous amount of work on this, and I said jokingly almost in January that this is going to be something that we talk about every day for a whole year, and it pretty much has been. Not because it's not important, but it's just, it's very hard to discuss something that everybody still has questions on it. We do the best we can, but it's still, if we don't know, we're not sure, we don't have an answer, we haven't got complete clarification, and that makes things very difficult. But I want to go back and see for a 60-second follow-up. Councilor Swope.
Thank you, President Lettieri. One, this was a legislative bill, and all of a sudden, the executive branch is adding more and more punitive measures to it. Milton is fighting that case. I hope they win. To me, this is not appropriate. Goals do change. Number two, they have changed 4 times. That's a big problem on the executive side. And if those continue to promulgate, we will be punished in some way. But that should not be something that we do because of a few grants, which we've gotten very few of, by the way. We need to stand on principle of zoning in this town. That's my feeling. And one more quick thing. The exemption might be possible. That would be great. And two, to your point about Seal Harbor and bedrooms, I could make my living room a bedroom and still have access. And if 3A goes through, I might be able to add more people there. And that would be a fight. That would be probably a legal fight in the end that we would have to adjudicate, but I don't want to go through that if possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's important to see what's before us, and that is a proposal that requires us to build 0 additional units as a result of 3A. If we can get assured, I'll be with Councilor Costigan, to get the assurances that this community has raised and should continue to raise about the protections of the condo documents, the sanctity of the condo documents about Governor's Park, and up at Seal Harbor, we should take a real solid look at that, because that to me would seem something sensible. Again, if we can get 0 new units, which is what the proposal calls for, combined with a complete satisfaction of the concerns of the folks in those 2 condominium complexes, I think we should just give that a good look. Thank you.
Councilor DeMarco.
Sorry, I'm biting my tongue a little bit. First, we got to look at the fact that, one of the stipulations about accepting 3A is that if we don't accept it, we could lose grants. And we've already lost grants, and we haven't even voted on anything. They're already taking them away from us, okay? So they're punishing us before we've even committed the crime, all right? The second thing is, I appreciate your comments on Seal Harbor. I'm not looking at such an extreme example. I'm looking more at like, well, what if I want to put a 3rd bedroom in versus having a 2-bedroom? That's something that you might be able to do under 3A. And these people bought into a private complex where their condo bylaws state that you can't have more than 2 bedrooms. So that's a conflict that needs to be worked out. And finally, where is Lydia Edwards right now? I mean, seriously. If she's at boot camp, that's okay. That's totally acceptable. But where is she? We're having a joint meeting of the planning board and our council, and we need her here. We need her. We need to hear from her.
Councilor Munson, any,
Closing remarks?
like a 60-second retort? Question, really.
I guess if you have to sum it up, a no vote basically means between $5 to $8 million in lost grant money over the course of 3 years. And a yes vote, I mean in reverse. A yes vote means that we would get 5 to 8 million over the next 3 years. And a no vote means that we would have to come out of pocket for, or just give up some of these improvements. As of right now, there's just a lot of problems. I'm not sure it's good. I don't think it's going to pass. Lastly, I want to say, I wish the opportunity for the people to decide was there.
Councilor Costigan.
Yeah, again, there's a lot here, and I feel for all the councilors, but who's to say they don't amend this law 10 years from now because they didn't accomplish the affordable aspect of 3A? Maybe Governor's Park will change. Maybe that will be 5 stories in 20 years. I'm just saying, is there any definitive answer to that where it will never be changed? Can it be amended? So that's my concern there. And as far as grant money, I believe it's $2.3 million over the last 10 years. One of those years was $2 million alone. So prior to that, 9 years, less than $100,000 per year. So just one more comment. We have the override coming up for the schools, the firehouse. These are very, very tough monetary decisions for the town. And as I've been saying all along, we got to be very, very careful. But, with regards to the grant money, Winthrop has always done it alone. We've always fought, whether it's, 60 cents for the tunnel, which never came through. And our neighbors who, needless to say, we get compensated for our inconveniences. But we are Winthrop strong, and we are in this for the long haul, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up again in comments only concerning 3A, please. And come up to the microphone for your question. Yes.
My name is Amy Yora. I live at... My name is it on? I don't... No. My name is Amy Yora. I am a resident at Governor's Park. First of all, my first question is to the planning board. Was Governor's Park ever consulted, or Seal Harbor consulted? Were they approached to find out what our condo docs say? I was on the board for years. This came out of the blue for us. There aren't people from Governor's Park here. The management company, you go to them and they say they haven't come down with any rules yet. This is something that we have taxpayers in this town. Okay, part of my questions come up with, are you talking about changing? Okay, the Governor's Park can be changed within our condo docs, but who's to say that they're not going to turn around and the state's going to say, okay, now you're going to have, every unit's going to have 4 the bigger units are gonna have, we have 3 size units. And the bigger units are now gonna, have 4 bedrooms. There's no way of saying that. Okay. Governor's Park actually, except for 2 buildings, are already 4 stories. There's the base and 3 more floors above them. How can you, as our representatives, impose this on Governor's Park and Seal Harbor without us being involved in the discussions about it? You're saying it's not going to affect us, but very honestly, state could change its mind and say, bang, we're going to build buildings in the back of Governor's Park. I was on the board when they tried to put a road through there. And my concern is that we could be forced to build more buildings there. You say that they can't buy us out? It could be. I mean, I'm very concerned that you're not approaching the people at Governor's Park or at Seal Harbor and saying, this could possibly affect you. And I think it needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Diane. Diane.
Hi, Diana Vance, Precinct 2. I was very much prepared to talk about...
It is.
Hello?
It is on. It's on.
Don't start my 3 minutes yet, Denise. Hello? Can you guys hear me?
It's on. It's on.
Stay close.
Sorry.
Stay close.
All right. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the MAPC 3A suitability map. I certainly am. It rates your home here in Winthrop in terms of your 3A suitability. I happen to be very high suitability. Congratulations to me. Those who are missing and whose homes are skipped over from this map include Joe Aiello, Max Tassinari, Hannah Belcher, and John DeRoss. I'm sorry for the rest of you. Here are my 2 children. Okay? They're upside down. Here are my 2 children. They're really beautiful little girls, and that's where we live. In these one of the dark blue points here, it's about 90% of Winthrop has a 3A suitability rating, except for those 4 people I just read. Well, that being said, Seal Harbor happens to be very suitable, and it looks like, in terms of net residential capacity for Seal Harbor, we've got 4.78 acres. So despite the planning board's assertion, that there is no building happening, the MAPC sees it differently. That being said, I swiped that all under the table, despite my brief point there, to take notes on the back of this 96-page brief from Kevin Milton, Martin, who represents Milton, to address my brother, Attorney Cipolletta. Respectfully, I vehemently disagree with my brother, who has decided that the question is not whether Winthrop will or will not comply with 3A. We will not, sir. And whose expertise includes representing developers. I have a history of representing the other side. Look me up. Certainly, he and I disagree as to the letter of the law and the interpretation of what is required. So does the SJC, which is why they put this before a full panel in October. I also disagree. That condos are somehow absconded from the situation here. New construction under OSHA includes painting a wall. So if someone paints a wall, they can jam a bunch of bedrooms in their unit. Okay? I don't know how close I am to the 3 minutes. Yep, there's my cue. Okay. Oh, Another thing, I haven't been able to get a meeting with this man despite the fact that he is saying that he's fighting for the town of Winthrop. We're on the second petition where we had to actually fight against this man to even have a vote in this town. And we filed the amicus brief, and we are filing the exemption. I wholeheartedly encourage this entire board to support our exemption if you really are for the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you pass him? Yes. Mr. Jerry Falbo, please.
Thank you very much. You'll have to excuse me, my voice is not good tonight. I hope that you will understand me. First of all, I want to thank the planning board for all your hard work on this. I've been reading the paper.
There you go. Stay right there.
Okay. I also want to thank Tony and Mr. Cipolletta and also the town council, because I think you've all done a hell of a job so far. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to add. First of all, we should, the town council with the planning board, should request a letter from the Attorney General and also the Housing Secretary, so that in the event it goes through, we are protected in the future from any kind of lawsuit that may come about. Also, there are two pending cases, as you've all admit, Milton and one of the North Shore communities. What is that, North Shore? Rockport.
Nope.
Now, I know that Rockport has an issue of the constitutionality of the Section 3. And I also know Milton has just discussed it. They're saying everything is on us, including the airport. But I think if we can get a waiver on our time limits, we should wait for those cases. I cannot make up my mind until I go further. Incidentally, did someone from the planning board say that Seal Harbor was by special permit?
Yes.
No, it
Yes.
wasn't. I remember because I was on the planning board many moons ago, and we fought it, but Sumner Kaplan was good at it. He was the one at the town meeting approved of the zoning change, and it's the only place in town that there's a zoning change to that level, high rise. Something else is bothering me. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that there is no zoning change at Governor's Park or Fort Heath. Is that correct?
Proposed in 3A?
Assuming 3A comes about.
I think there's no change proposed. The lot density
That's right.
stays.
There's no zoning changes, as far as I know. All right. They're using the amount of people at Governor's Park and Seal Harbor to make up our section of our contribution. We're still short. I think we're supposed to have 8,700 some units under Chapter 3. Well, the way I figure it out, we're still going to be about 200 and some odd short.
We did get an exemption for that 221 to make up that difference.
Or you can get the exemption? Oh, I didn't know that.
An offset.
What I was thinking, what I read in the transcript a couple weeks ago, your expert suggested that you satisfied the, whatever it was, the 200 units plus, by using the center business district. Because we did years ago. Well, anyway, if it's a non-issue. Okay. I'm almost complete. I'm almost finished. I can hardly talk. Oh, and by the way, I meant to agree with Joe and Susan, I think, who said get letters. That is extremely important to protect us for the future. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. And I just want to personally thank you for your over 50 years of work for this town. Thank you very much.
I should bill them for this now, that I'm retired.
Carol? Yes.
Hello, Carol Ficella, Precinct 4. We've all acknowledged that there is a housing crisis and shortage in Massachusetts. However, under 3A, it is creating more problems than alleviating or solving the problems that they're trying to address. Here's the problem with 3A. Everything. It is unconstitutional in all regards, and you've sloughed over that as if it doesn't matter. That is key issues for the protection of our citizens in this town. There is an overreach by the state which is unconstitutional in controlling parts of our town through zoning. By doing so, they're eliminating the restrictions that are in place through the local zoning. So if we live in that zone, we don't have those restrictions regarding the number of bedrooms, the size of the bedrooms, the number of occupants. That is dismissed. That's the purpose of this law. They want to reduce the barriers because the goal is to increase occupancy. Making you pick designated zones. If you do so, you are going to become complicit with the state in violating citizens' rights. That's what you're going to be doing. That's not your job. Your job is to protect this community. Both councils are to protect this community. It is discriminatory to apply a law to one segment of our town and not to another segment. That is basic law 101. All laws have to be applied in an equal and fair fashion to all residents. You cannot cherry pick and selectively give rights to some people and not to others. If I live in that zone, you are depriving me of my local rights. I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase, taxation without representation. You are taxing me as a local resident, and yet I'm not afforded the protections under your zoning laws that other people in town enjoy. This is illegal. It's unconstitutional. I urge the planning board not to identify any designated zones. It's not just because I'm at Seal Harbor. I don't want to stick anyone else in this town with these same problems. I don't want you to be complicit in violating our constitutional rights. However, you have a choice here, which is far greater. I've heard repeatedly you have a task, and the task is to pick designated zones. I would challenge you to rise to a greater task, which is to protect our interest. You have to be fair and just, not duplicitous, in making us be sacrificial lambs in this process. I know you're good people. I know you've worked hard, but you've got to do the right thing here. You've got to come out on the right side of the constitutional issues. Saying that you're following the rules, saying that you were told to do this, many good people in the past have made huge mistakes because they followed the rules. You've got to stand up and defend what's just and what's right. Regarding the town council, you also have a duty and obligation to protect the rest of this town. We have rights and freedoms that should be honored under this situation. Please let me finish. I urge you to vote no, not to vote no, to take no vote, to wait until the Milton case gets resolved, and to wait until the citizens have a right to vote on this issue. Do not prematurely say yes to this. If you do so, the consequences will be severe. Regarding grants, you're fearful. The law specifies 4 grants for which we would be ineligible. Milton right now is challenging the executive branch, which is adding on more and more grants. They're not allowed to do that. This is a law, and only 4 grants have been identified. It's illegal. The executive branch cannot do that. The courts cannot add stiffer penalties. Attorney General Campbell right now is also being challenged in the Milton case in their legal brief. She is overstepping her boundaries and the power. She doesn't have the authority to do so. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Please
Cal.
don't abuse your power.
Diane.
Hi, Diane Sands, Precinct 5. Oh, closer. Okay. Diane Sands, Precinct 5. I just have a couple of questions. I had a chance to read the 3 paragraphs that were passed in by law by the legislature in 2021. The only part of this that was passed by law. The guidelines, I might add, were not passed by law. They've just added, and willy-nilly. They've been changed 4 times. So this is something that we fear could be changed repeatedly, rolling guidelines, and I just want to make a point of that. One of the things in the first paragraph says that, let's see, it says, it can't be over a half a mile from a bus stop, an MBTA station, or the ferry. So I'm looking at Seal Harbor and the overlay district. And I'm asking, the only thing that is within a half a mile of that district is a bus stop. But the bus stop is on Winthrop property. The bus is MBTA property. So why does this qualify as a district at all?
No.
We're exempt.
It's the first paragraph of the law.
Exempt from the half-mile distance.
We're exempt from the half-mile distance.
We are?
That's what I was just told.
Why? Why don't we look at that? That's the first paragraph. It says that these are the qualifiers. An MBTA station, a ferry, or a bus stop. And the bus stops are on Winthrop property. It's the buses that belong to the T.
Mr. Council President, if I could.
I mean, I would have stopped at the first paragraph right there and challenged that.
Thank you.
Hello? So I'll go on from there, but that's one thing I would question. The guidelines, again, I would never settle this because I would question that they would continue changing the guidelines. One of the arguments in Winthrop that I see is this is a zoning issue. A zoning issue. Of course, the state just wants a lot of work and a lot of money spent by 177 communities to just zone. I'm sure that's not the truth, that eventually they'll say develop it, and we're hearing then the other argument is, oh, but we do need more tax money. So what's the problem? The same people that are arguing it's just zoning, they also say we need more tax money. So it's the two-sided coin, you know. We just don't need more grant money from this bill. That's the problem. So that's the argument. We do have a lot of representation from MAPC locally. They're putting on a lot of pressure on people and citizens. And they're not telling the truth, frankly. And the other thing I just want to quickly say is that when I collected signatures, I wanted to say the same thing about Governor's Park, is nobody was aware of anything in Governor's Park that was going on. I was telling them about it, but they knew nothing about it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Lois? President Gill.
Okay. Peter Gill, Precinct 5. Am I in the right place, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. I was elected a town meeting member 59 years ago. You probably don't think I'm that old, but since then I've been relatively involved in the town government, and I have the last 20 years been more involved than in the previous. I have to say that I want to commend the planning board. I've seen the planning board work when in the last 15 years when I was active in the council, and you guys have done one hell of a job, and along with Jim and Tony, and I appreciate all that you have done. You have taken a lot of the concerns and dealt with them. And the same with the council. That being said, I'm not going to take my whole 3 minutes. I'm going to say what you've heard me say before. Just say no now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take the rest of his 2 minutes plus my 3?
No.
And do I get a rebuttal? You gave me a lot of material to work with here, so I'll try to keep it concise and to the point. Planning board, thank you. Thank you.
Name and precinct, we know you're retired now.
Terry
but just
Delahanty, Precinct 6. My counsel is not here tonight, so don't report me back to him. Thank you for all your hard work. You get the purpose and the intent of the statute and how it affects Winthrop. I hear everyone saying no. People ask me to come out and say no. I said, no, I would not do that. But I gave my word. I gave my word to the Morton Street people, to the Pico Ave people, and the Tileston Road people, that I would do no harm to them, and I would assist them in every grant I could get for them to stop the inundation and flooding of their houses. No one's talking about that. One lady lost 2 cars down there. Winthrop Street, flooding away. We're trying to get them sandbags down on Morton Street. I hope everyone will come and fill them and place them out there to help the tidal action on Morton Street. But we're worrying about Sail Harbor. And I'm not picking on the councilor. Sail Harbor in general we're worrying about. Governor's Park, where is their attorneys? If I went and asked the town council for a legal opinion of whether or not I could build an addition on my property, they would tell me, there's the door, we don't give legal opinions to citizens. So why are we giving legal opinions to Sail Harbor and Governor's Park? They have enough collective wealth on both properties to hire their own attorney. That's what their condo association's for. Their master deed directs each unit and what each unit can do. Not transferring a deed of a unit that will allow more bedrooms to be built in that unit because the master deed stays in place upon transfer of those deeds. Now, so I've heard from one councilor tonight, paper compliance. Why do paper compliance? This is nonsense. Go down and tell that to Morton Street, Pico, and Tileston. A couple months ago, Tileston jammed the room, and they had flooding issues. There was a motion that night on the floor to give them $100,000 for pumps. Where are we getting $100,000? We need $4.9 million for the school. $900,000 is no longer an issue. We're flush with money. $900,000 a year can do a lot for this community. So don't discount. Bob DeLeo in 1 year brought $10 million in, replaced the entire DPW fleet. So to say that we don't need money or it's paper compliance so it's useless, tell that to those people. If you really want to care about the community and take the community in as a whole and not the has and have-nots, vote for it and then challenge it in court. Don't harm the people that we promised would help when we're running for election or when we're acting town manager. I stand by my word. I stand with those people. And if this will not harm them, then I would say go ahead. But it will harm them. So stop and reflect. Don't just react to the people with the loudest crowd. Think of everyone in the community. That's what we appoint the planning board to do, and that's why we elect the councilors to do. And that's what we expect the town manager to do and our legal counsel. So I'll leave you with maybe 2 legal questions, and I don't expect an answer. It's not a back and forth. I understand that. So if we don't have these districts and we don't develop these districts, I was reading a case law today on zoning, and it says, well, if your zoning laws do not prohibit it or do not grant it, then you can do it. So my question is, if we don't have these districts that specifically say these areas are it, does the whole town become 3A under this statute? I know it's complicated and needs research. That's why I won't. So I think that's a very important case law. It was a Revere case law right next to us. And we talk about development and people coming into Governor's Park and tearing down the whole place. They built 4 towers over at the racetrack, right? 4. They stopped. You know why they stopped? They weren't making a profit because of building materials, supplies, and payroll. So they were going to make, I think, 48 buildings over there. I think they did 4, and they stopped production. So for everyone to see and say they're going to come in and tear down Governor's Park is fear-mongering. It does not actually add up to a profitable item now or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Chief Delahanty for those comments. I'm Julia Wallers, Precinct 2. I am a resident of Morton Street. I am one of the people that literally stands to win or lose based on access to grants like the one that we just lost. And that wasn't what I was here to talk about tonight, but I felt very moved by your comments, Chief. It's real. This is not a game. This is not a joke. And what I'm hearing tonight is that we have a proposal to put our town into compliance with this zoning law, not a building law, in a way that would actually downzone the two districts, Seal Harbor and Governor's Park, would be zoned for less units than they have today. So even in that theoretical world that it burned to the ground or somebody bought every building in Governor's Park, they would still not be able to build back what it is today. Because if we were compliant with 3A, those districts would still not have enough units, would still have below the threshold. So I don't understand that this is the hill we're going to die on when we have a major deficit for our schools. I have an incoming 5th grader. Tomorrow is the first day of school. If we don't pass this override, her class size might go up to 35. That's not okay. And all because we don't want to comply with a zoning law that actually downzones and ensures 0 new buildings. 0. It's disturbing, it's concerning, and I thank Attorney Saboletta for the clarification on the condo docs. I think if we can get that on letterhead, there are legitimate concerns. But with regards to what Councilor Costigan said, with traffic and affordability, these are real problems that we're attacking the wrong solution with a real problem. Because we're still building. We've still got hundreds of units that we've zoned for. And I think this paper compliance outcome is ideal for Winthrop because we're not the target community. We are dense. We are doing our part. We have contributed a lot to the multifamily housing production scenario over the decades. So this should be easy for us. It's a really easy box to check. And the consequences for not doing so, I think, severely outweigh the potential theoretical risks of doing so because this paper compliance plan yields 0 impact. In the meantime, we stand to lose a lot. And as a parent of children in these schools, as a resident in a district that faces severe flooding, it upsets me to think that we're going to reject a law because we don't need those grants. And it's not just the grants, it's the litigation. Milton's almost $1 million in the hole. Do we want to do that at the expense of our limited tax base? We can go it alone, can we? This is not the fight we should be fighting. Please, we need some leadership here. We need everyone to be heard. I would love the state to come in and clearly listen to us and clarify some of these misperceptions. It would be great if the Attorney General were to come to Winthrop or Lieutenant Governor. And then we can focus on an inclusionary zoning ordinance, on a design standard so that we can actually address, on a transportation demand management. We have real problems. 3A is not one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Clara Arroyave, Precinct 3. I want to thank the planning board for a really good job, really great explanation. Attorney Jim, thank you for your explanation of the implications for the town and what the process is and what the fight has been for us to be either compliant or fight for the exemption. This is very important process. I remember being before in a budget meeting, I think a couple of months ago, and understanding really well how bad our fiscal situation is. And you were mentioning also before, this question is for you, what are the implications of going to litigation, knowing that the town already has a really serious fiscal deficit, and we're talking school, fire, we're talking about like infrastructure, all that. What are the fiscal implications for us as taxpayers? Who is going to pay if only a certain part of the town wants to pursue litigation and other people do not want to pursue litigation? How does that scenario play out? While what I can see here is that we are ready, if we do what is called, not to everybody's acceptance, paper compliance, that will be under what is required. If we go that way, what are the fiscal implications for that? For you, attorney, thank you.
This is more of a public comment. We're just taking comments in now.
So to conclude, I will be mindful of the town fiscal situation, what are the legal costs, and who's going to pay for that. And I stand my opposition. I don't know what my taxes to pay for something that we can be easily move on and pass. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Tom Dedarian, Precinct 3, and I've been paying attention to this issue since the beginning, and I am pleased that the planning board has come up with a plan that will be of minimal impact to the town of Winthrop. I'm hearing the number 54 units would be allowed to be built. So the threat to the town is very small. So I suggest that the planning board vote yes on this plan, present it to the town council. The town council presents it to the state, and then we will see what happens. And we can move on to some problems that are greater threats to the town. For example, we cannot zone away sea level rise. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Carl Rothenhaus, Precinct 6. Just two things that I was talking about today. I've heard a lot of things. I know I mentioned risk of noncompliance, and there's a lot of hypotheticals been thrown around what that, and just like the idea of can we go it alone, and the answer is no. We already can't. We already have an intersection, Winthrop, Main, Revere. That's Winthrop, Main, and Winthrop, Main, Revere Street intersection. It's already illegal. We can't afford to fix it. If somebody gets hit, it's immediately a litigation that's going to cost the town possibly millions of dollars. And we do not have the money to fix it. We already cannot go it alone, and we are in the hole for not being able to go it alone. No, we cannot go it alone. It's the taxes go giant up. That means my rent's going to go up because I rent person. His taxes, my landlord's his rent's going to go way up. So we cannot go it alone. The other thing people have talked about is rolling requirements. Regulations always change. That's just the nature of regulations. New regulations come out. Once a law passes, regulations have to come out. To use the example of literally Schoolhouse Rock, in the I'm Just a Bill, the bill that in question is school buses should stop at railroad crossings. Regulation then has to go, what's a school bus? And this is the same thing. The legislator put out a law about what is zoning. Well, they put out a law about zoning. Then the regulations go, okay, what does that zone actually look like? What is the terms, conditions to complying with what the legislator wrote out? Because often legislatures, because of how they work, they don't want to get into specifics, and they say, oh, the governor will deal with that. And so that's why regulations come out. That's why they change, is because usually the bills are very generic, and that's just how it works. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Hi, Kathleen Capuccio, 49 Waldemar Ave. First, I'd like to address some of the comments
that I'm just really was a wow to be quite honest with you, with regard to the loss of the MVP grant and the terrible flooding on Moore Street. I think maybe some people just aren't clear, but I'm not sure. We do not have to comply with MBTA 3A until December 31st, 2024. I apologize,
Four.
sorry.
Four.
So for anyone to somehow think that it's acceptable if the state, in fact, did deny this grant, when we don't even have to comply with a law yet, is outrageous. So if people actually think that's the case, then I hope people are going to start storming the State House, not literally, sorry, but with your signs and stuff, because we don't have to comply yet. So if that is actually what happened, put your anger in the right damn place against the state if that in fact happened. I have no proof that happened. Maybe they didn't like our paperwork, but come on with that. I mean, that's just absurd. As for specifically 3A, what President Lettieri said, and this is my big issue with 3A, is the goalpost is continuously changing. We're being asked to comply with the law and guidelines that are continuously changing. So we don't really know if we're complying today, let's say, what is it going to be next year? So, I mean, that for me is a huge issue with 3A. As for the condo docs, I respect that Mr. Cipolletta, or Attorney Cipolletta, sorry, reached out to, Secretary Augustus' office and the AG's office, to get their opinion, if you will. I don't trust what the AG's office says when it comes to condominium documents, not based on the behavior that has come from the AG's office, and also with the, again, continuously changing of these laws and these guidelines. And I also would love to see an independent legal opinion as to this. And as to put that on the residents of Seal Harbor and Governor's Park, we are one community here. So let's look at this as one community. But again, if people think we lost that MVP grant, which again, that flooding down there is horrific, put your anger where it should be, please.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Devin Fields. I'm a resident in Precinct 5, and I'm here to voice my support for compliance with the MBTA Communities Act. I want to thank the Planning Board for the time that they've put into this process. I'd also like to thank the Town Council for being receptive to all of the residents who have reached out with their various perspectives and points of view. I think that you've enabled a lot of conversation in your joint meetings, hiring a consultant, and I want to just say thank you for what can be a thankless process. I know a bit about the MBTA Communities Act, and I do not believe that it is a defining issue of this town. I think climate change is a defining issue of this town. I think workforce housing and development are defining issues of this town. And I think that we have a lot of opportunities to pursue things that can help make the best Winthrop possible. And non-compliance with this law is not a path that I wish to see us go down for those reasons. I feel confident that if we pass this, there are bodies in this community whose sole purpose it is to regulate and restrict and enforce on our health and safety guidelines. And I do hope that we will, give an opportunity for that process to play out in a lawful way that doesn't harm us financially. Earlier, someone was mentioning, the loss of this MVP grant. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that our community is strapped for resources as it is. We don't have a dedicated grant writing position. To my knowledge, we don't have a town planner on staff at this time, and if we continue to not invest in those types of resources, we will continue to lose out on these opportunities. And I would hate to see us not be able to take every single opportunity that we have. I think a good example of this is the fact that taxpayers are being asked to pass an override. Our schools are not meeting the basic needs of the children of the town. And so for us to not comply when we have so many bigger fights ahead of us, including affordable housing, which we could immediately address by implementing an inclusionary zoning ordinance. I hope that we'll wait for the outcome of what happens in Milton. I hope that we'll consider all resources available to us, and that you continue to keep the conversation going until you determine to have a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Todd Sacco, Precinct 2. First, I want to address the Morton Street flooding. I think it's a bit unfair to make it seem like this whole 3A fight is the reason that Morton Street's had all these, and Tyleston have had these problems. This has been going on for a lot longer than 3A has been a discussion. In fact, we can go back to Council President Turco's time when we were talking about an emergency access road to go to Fort Banks that was going to go down Morton Street and cut behind Governor's Park. We paid for 2 parking spots that we now aren't using because there was some bitterness back during the time. But there was also flood mitigation plans in that program. The town has failed Morton Street and Tyleston Road and Pico Park long before 3A. Long before 3A. We've had our priorities backwards long before 3A. I also heard a comment about 3A and the schools and override. Those things have nothing to do with each other. 3A and the schools have nothing to do with each other. The word trust was brought up earlier by one of the counselors. And then same council was questioning whether or not the law would change in the future. The EOHLC, if I'm getting that right, has changed the guidelines 4 times already. I'm not sure why there's a question about whether or not they would do it. And they'll do it again. We have no reason to trust them. And in fact, 3 of the counselors whose homes are not showing up in the MAPC suitability site happen to be quite tight and friendly with the state senator and are having off-the-books meetings and conversations that are completely inappropriate about 3A. We have no reason to trust 3 of our counselors, our state senator, and the state. We should be voting no on this and making it go away. Thank you.
I would like to thank Pat Costigan.
Jack, just state your name and precinct.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Forgetful. Really. Jack Dowd, Precinct 1. I would like to thank Pat Costigan for his knowledge about all affairs, whether it's Winthrop, the state, the United States, or the world. I really do appreciate your succinct comments. And Attorney Cipolletta, you mentioned when you were at the podium. Sorry about that. I think I want to hit somebody. That this is a very important meeting. And you mentioned important more than once. So if we could get your verbatim speech here as soon as possible, and have somebody do that, so we can read it and have knowledge of it and study it, I'd appreciate it. Terry, I think there's only one building down there. I mean, I've been seeing things, but isn't it just one building at the Suffolk Downs? I haven't noticed.
That's okay.
Thank you. And as far as Morton Street and flooding, it was just mentioned here, and you mentioned Morton Street. I've mentioned it many times. I asked Julia Wallace to look out her window about 3 years ago and solve the problems in front of her house. I walked off Morton Street, 1,300 feet. By the way, the town took down a berm that was there. and they put up a wood fence. I've mentioned this a couple of times. Unfortunately, the water goes right under the wood fence. So let's do something. We can do that in-house. We can build a berm in-house. It's very simple. There's plenty of room down there. We would not obstruct any traffic. It can be done in-house. And that's a good start. 1,300 feet is a lot of feet. I think I covered everything. Imagine that. Where's the bell?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Celeste Barrow Hewitt, Precinct 1, and I'm a member of the newly created Climate Commission. Thank you, everybody, for the work that you've done. As I tell my children in life, one who just completed her master's and is looking for her career, follow each lane, anticipate every eventuality, prepare for everything, and then take the best situation, right? And I think that that's what we're looking to do today. Planning board is planning and putting together the best case scenario along with our folks that we've hired to put that together in partnership with the town council, putting together consideration, and Attorney Cipolletta. So I appreciate all of that work, and I think that that's what we should be continuing to do. We should be prepared. We should make the best decision for ourselves based on outcomes in Milton and other information and legal advice that we get. And then I think that we should take into consideration the best case scenario for the residents here in Winthrop. And I am not sure what happened with the MVP grant, right? There's lots of speculation. Historically, we have partnered up with other municipalities. This time we decided to go it alone. It could be that with climate impacts and all of those things really glaring on the horizon, they may have changed the way they decide to allocate the grants, or it could be a shot over the bow because it's not very quiet that folks here in Winthrop are pushing back and pushing back hard against MBT 3A. So any of those things are possible. I think what is important to note is that a lot of the concerns that people have raised, whether it's numbers of bedrooms in condos, what happens to Governor's Park or Sail Harbor if we redevelop, I don't think that goes away if 3A goes away. I think a big developer could roll into town and buy up Governor's Park or Sail Harbor. I think daily there are probably condo owners going hand-to-hand combat about what they decide to do with their property. So, to echo Todd, there's a lot of things that are being talked about that have nothing to do with 3A. And I think in terms of keeping the power in Winthrop, Councilor DeMarco, I think that it lands with planning and it lands with zoning. No matter what we end up with for 3A, or big developers or anything else, we need to put the protections in place. And again, this 3A conversation has cracked open the dialogue. What does Winthrop do with zoning that is not popular or can be perceived as a negative impact or detrimental? And I guess I've got two questions. One for Councilor Cipolletta. Aside from the threats of withholding grants and funding, are we opening ourselves up to a lawsuit from the state if we decide to not comply?
Again,
You don't have
this
to
is
answer
just
that now. It's just something that I think that's going to be important for us to know. So whether we decide to use resources to launch into a resistance, or will we be forced to use resources if we don't comply? That's going to be important to know, because you know what? It is important to understand that we are facing budget shortfalls. We're being forced to vote on a 2.5 override, and we have major infrastructure deficits as it is. My second question is to the planning board. In my day job, I support construction projects. I have a development that I'm supporting in Salem. It's very sizable. The town of Salem has forced us to put in new sewer systems. The utility companies in the town have forced us to put in new utility lines to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars. My question is, do we have the ability to put in place zoning requirements? And I know that we have talked in previous meetings about having other zoning that also will, could coincide with the 3A zoning that would keep us from, facing unsavory impacts. And so is there an opportunity to do something like that? Should somebody come in, buy Governor's Park, and I'm sorry for going over time, and want to put in a giant townhouse farm, should we force them to provide the commensurate infrastructure, whether it's utilities, whether it's sewer, whether it's funding education seats, or funding first responders. That's the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Sennett, Precinct 2. Question I have is for Tony. In your presentation of the overlays and the numbers, you mentioned buildable space at Seal Harbor. What buildable space? I thought there wasn't going to be any building up there. You said buildable land.
Again, this is just public comment, and we appreciate it.
So I would like an answer to that. Second of all, you know, the people that are fighting this the most have really no skin in the game other than their townspeople. Diana Vines, Vasily Malios, Cheryl Howard, Kathleen Capuccio. These people don't even live in an overlay district. And this is a town-wide issue. It's going to affect all of us. So I urge you, please don't vote on it. The people that are fighting the hardest don't even live in the district.
Thank you.
Scott Mahoney Wright, Precinct 3. I'm sitting here listening to the conversations. People have made some really, really fine points this evening. But for me, this has come down to a couple of basic things. We're not talking about the number of units anymore. We're not talking about compliance. We've already figured out how to achieve paper compliance if we're going to go forward with that. What we have to understand is that we're guided by laws. We're a community guided by laws, by state, by federal. It comes down to whether or not we're going to follow the law and what the outcomes and implications to the town of Winthrop are if we don't follow the law, what the financial ramifications are for our future. How are we going to pay for things? We've talked about losing money, the MVP grant, I guess. But what about other money that we might be eligible for and disqualified from because we don't follow the law? What happens then? How do we fund things? Is it going to come from our property taxes? Frankly, I don't want mine to go up much more. It's getting expensive to live here. If we don't have other resources and revenue coming into this town, how do we pay for things that we need to pay for? We can't. For me, it's about following the integrity of the law. I'm not saying we don't have a right to question the law, we do. But this law was enacted in 2021, 3 years ago, and we're just having these conversations now with a deadline looming, 3 months away. So it really comes back to, do we follow the law? Do we wait and see what Milton and Rockport, what those two cases are how they're gonna play out in court, what the litigation is gonna look like before we make a move? The planning board's already done its job. It's already pulled together. We have an idea what we need to do. How do we wanna play our cards? That's what it's about. And following the law. That's it.
Thank you, and thank all. No more public comment. No, thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Okay.
new public comment.
Lee Foley, Precinct 6. Yes. I just want to reiterate, everybody said basically what I wanted to say. I'm very, very worried about the financial side. If we have to go to litigation, how much is it going to cost us? We have our override coming up. To me, this seems like, paper compliance seems like the perfect compromise because the consultants on the planning board did listen to our concerns that are some of them very legitimate. So I wanted to just reiterate, paper compliance, we should stay in the state's good books. We need the state. We pay our taxes to the state. We get more than just grants from the state. We get a hell of a lot from the state. And living close to the city of Boston is a huge benefit and draw for our community. And having good schools and having families and others move here is important. So Santa's wish list, we want a lot of money. We want to do all these great things, but I think we need to prioritize, and we can compromise, I think, on this paper compliance. And also, I've been asked to just remind people that Lydia Edwards is at boot camp. That's why she's not here today. So, okay. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lisa Alberghini, Precinct 3. I'm sorry, 6. Precinct 6. And thanks for clarifying that Senator Edwards, why she's not here this evening serving our country instead. I want to thank the planning board, the town council, everyone has done that before you, and I'm going to try and keep this brief and be under my 3 minutes because I agree with everyone who's spoken previously about complying with the law. There's been a lot of information presented, and I also agree with one of the earlier gentlemen who said, I think this comes down to actually 2 things. One is complying with the law, and the second is doing it in a way that has the least impact on Winthrop. And I think that the plan that the planning board has come up with through an incredible amount of thoughtful work does exactly that. We comply with the law, and it does it in a way that has pretty minimal impact on Winthrop. On complying with the law, the Commonwealth has every right to be able to establish zoning laws. It is in, I think, Section 60 of the amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution. There are very similar laws that have been passed previously that have been upheld as constitutional. So I really hope we don't spend our limited energy and even more limited resources fighting something that has been proven, I think, and will continue to be proven to be constitutional. This is about complying with the law. The negative impact on the town's finances, I think, cannot be overstated. I appreciate the comments made previously by the chief and others who have said, I mean, not only will we lose, when we lose money, because we will, the taxpayers will have to pay that, and you can forget about any override for the schools and the fire station. It will not even be a question, because if we're first needing to make up money that we're going to lose, there won't be room in people's budgets for anything else. I'm puzzled when some say that the law means hundreds of units will be built, because as a couple people on the planning board pointed out, first of all, I'm not sure, someone said earlier we might have to build 54 units. I think it might be 0, given the plan, although I'm not entirely sure on that. But additionally, if there were, by some weird, bizarre, super strange thing, someone were to buy up the condos at Seal Harbor or any other large development here, and start over again, there would be fewer units, allowed under 3A. So I'm like super puzzled that people think that there will be somehow more units built. At the same time, I really understand some of the concerns that have arisen, and we should take those seriously. There are a couple of key questions that remain, one of which is the effect on condo docs. That's a real question, it's a concern, we should get the answer. But I would say really that let's spend our energy and Winthrop's resources adopting this good plan. And I support the law. I think our town has done a great job exploring the options that will have minimal impact. And once those couple of remaining questions are answered, I would really urge that we move forward quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. No more. Anyone who hasn't spoken, I don't want to open it up again, because then by right, I would have to let everybody speak again. Yes.
I wasn't going to speak, but I just have a rhetorical question.
Again,
really.
just name and precinct.
My name is Kim Costigan. I'm in Precinct 1. I just have a rhetorical question for everyone to ponder. Has Massachusetts or any other state ever made or created a bad law? Has every law
Thank you.
that the state has ever passed by legislature been the correct way for us to govern the state? There are many southern states that had a law that black and white children had to go to separate schools. There are bad laws all the time. My thought after reading through all the many documents, everyone's opinion on both sides, is that we must be considered exempt. When this law passed, I was actually excited. I said, oh, that's weird. Republican, pro-business Charlie Baker wants to build more housing for poor and working class families. That's very noble of him. When I dug a little further, as I got closer to understanding what was going on, I understood why he was, at the third try, finally able to pass that law. It wasn't out of altruism. It wasn't out of the goodness of his heart. It's to help those who make a lot of money developing large-scale units and shoving as many people in as possible. Now, if you are saying, oh, we don't have to worry, they won't build, we don't have to worry, all you have to do is look to the left, look to the right, East Boston, Revere, and that's exactly, we are waterfront, gorgeous property, 2 minutes from Boston. They are chomping at the bit to make us into what you see on Ocean Ave and Revere now in Revere Beach. Now, if you think Winthrop Beach should look like that, then you and I have different vision for our future in Winthrop. I love my little town. I've always said I have a love-hate relationship with this town. We can get into the reasons for that, but I want this to be an affordable town for working-class families. The buildings that will go up will not be affordable, as we've already seen. We've seen some developments that a studio apartment for $2,800. It's just, building more housing hasn't proven to be a panacea for affordable housing. And I just want to, and I do thank the Planning and Zoning Board, the council, the attorney, and Tony. I know you're all working very hard, but I just had to say something about, I couldn't keep my mouth shut, sorry.
Thank you. I do want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I think it's been a very good discussion. Again, I want to thank the Planning Board and remind everybody that the Planning Board was charged to do a task. The task that they were charged to do was to come to the council with a plan that complied with the state law. We can't thank them enough. They're not done yet. They still have probably about a month to go before they come back to us with that recommendation. After that, we'll have a couple of months to decide what the council wants to do. And just to remind everyone, it takes 5 yes votes from the council to approve the recommendation coming before. The planning board's going to come to us with a recommendation. At some point, there would be a vote. There would be a motion to accept the planning board's recommendation. That motion would be seconded. There would be a vote. You would need 5 yes votes. If there are 9 councilors here, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, you need 5 councilor votes. Again, I thank everybody. I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Vice President Belcher, second by Councilor DeMarco. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Again, thank you to the Planning Board. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Meeting adjourned.
Good night, guys. Thank you.